first of all, you have to understand, I have nothing better to do. I'm heartbroken. You know, I'm looking for something to channel the pain into.
We can joke about stalking or whatever, but there's a true principle here for all entrepreneurs.
But in my head, I'm like, I just caught a fluke of an angle and somehow like created leverage through it. But it was all because one day I sat down and was like, if life was perfect, what would happen next? Either this is a colossal, tremendous waste of time, or this will be an amazing story later. And here we are on ClickFunnels telling. So
Right. Welcome to ClickFunnels Radio, the podcast that brings you the latest strategies, insights, and success stories from online marketers just like you who utilize funnels to grow their business. Our mission is simple: to help you unleash the true potential of your online business by harnessing the power of funnels. Join us every week as we bring you exclusive interviews and thought-provoking discussions that will revolutionize the way you approach online marketing.
All right, everybody, welcome back to ClickFunnels Radio. This is episode 701. I can't believe there's been 700 episodes over the years, which is nuts.
Awesome.
But we have an incredible guest that we're excited to intro to you. But first, it is the co-hostess with the mostest, Mr. Chris Cameron. How are you today?
What up?
Today, we have a very special guest that we're lucky to have, honored to call him a friend, mentor, someone I've been able to learn from over the years, who is probably the best interviewer walking on planet Earth right now, has an incredible YouTube show called The Passionate Few, has done amazing things in this industry I can't wait to dive into. But as an entrepreneur, a marketer, philanthropist, mentor, Mr. Omar Elattar. Omar, how are you, dude?
I'm doing excellent. Thanks so much for the intro, Ben. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Absolutely.
I've been, so I appreciate that. Excited to be here.
Heck yeah, man. And we'd love to hear, I guess, full stories from the jump. And I know if we really dive into this, we could be here until the sun goes down. But I would love to hear about, your start. I know from, a skateboarding background. I mean, start it wherever you would like to.
Yeah, man. So it's a long story, but I can tell it I'll give you the 2-minute short of it.
The Cliff's Notes.
Yes. So long story short, I was always a dreamer, and always, much like probably most of the people in the ClickFunnels community or entrepreneurs in general, I was always somebody who was a dreamer and had big lofty dreams, but didn't have a vehicle, right? So this was a recurring theme in my life. When I was younger, I played soccer for 10 years, and then I wanted to play in club, and I wanted to be pro. And then after that, I got into doing commercials and short films and indie films, and I wanted to be an actor. And I did that for a little bit. And then this was like in my teens, and then I got into skateboarding. And then I did that for probably over a decade. And then I got to travel with Rob Dyrdek. And, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Rob Dyrdek, but I got to
Fantasy Factory, baby.
Fantasy Factory. Yeah, I actually was based out of the Fantasy Factory. So I used to go there.
No way.
Yeah. And I knew Rob and all that. And I used to travel with them for almost 2 years, almost 2 years.
Oh, that's wild.
So I found myself kind of in my early to mid 20s, having had all these dreams and amazing experiences. And I always excelled at stuff, but I could never quite fully monetize it. It's like I would monetize it, but not in a kind of sustainable way. And so I found myself in kind of my early to mid 20s, always like tasting success of the dream, but never fully having it, And so it was very frustrating because I tried all these vehicles, and I would see it, like, especially with social media, you see everyone else winning and you're like, man,
right.
What vehicle? How do I,
You see everybody else, like, in quotations, winning too. That's a thing, right?
True. Yeah. Especially as I've grown up and gotten to see behind the scenes, I've realized not all that glitters is gold.
Right.
But yeah, long story short, I was in a place like that. And so long story short, I after skateboarding, I realized, okay, unfortunately, I'm probably not going pro. And so then I was like, 23, 24, I went to a Tony Robbins seminar, met a guy sitting next to me. Tony Robbins had us do an exercise where he said, write down your current income and then write down your dream income. So my dream income at that time was 6 figures, right? I was like, man, if I could just make 100K, to me, that sounded like 100 million
Right.
that time. And so, but the guy sitting next to me, his income was like 400K and his goal was 1 million. And he was like in his 20s. And I was just like, man, he's at this seminar. And you're not supposed to see other people's notes, but at the Tony
You
seminar,
cheated?
I cheated. Yeah, because he was next to me. And you're not supposed to like technically look at other people's because it's private, but I kind of like just, it was like on a piece of paper next to me and in my head. And I see that his current income was like 400 or 450,000 and his goal income was 1 million. And I sat there thinking to myself, I'm like, this guy isn't that much older than me. He's probably like 2 or 3 years older. And his income is 4.5 times my fantasy income. And that's his income to start. So I mustered up the courage a couple hours later. In Tony Robbins seminars, you're there for like 12 hours a day. So you have time to break the ice, to say the least. So I started talking to him, and I said, if you don't mind me asking, man, I don't mean to be intrusive, but I saw your goal thing. I'm curious, what vehicle are you in, or what's your thing? And he goes, I'm actually in solar. And, he explained to me that he knocks doors and he has total autonomy. And
was his name Chris Lee?
No, it wasn't Chris Lee. Yeah, that's funny.
We interviewed him yesterday, man, and
that's
like
our last
the same
podcast
story.
guest.
Yeah. And so I forget his name now, but he connected me with a guy named Brandon Holmes, and he was like, "Hey, here's my info. If you're interested, here's the guy," because they're always looking to recruit, in the industry and knock doors. But of course, in my head, I'm like, knock doors. Like, I'm going to go from traveling on airplanes with Rob Dyrdek and pursuing all my dreams to knocking doors in the hot heat, selling $30,000 solar systems to people who don't want me there. Right. And so I was like, hell no, I'm not going to do that. But then I remembered the income, and then I looked at my negative, all my bank accounts being negative, and I said, screw it. Let me call the guy. So long story short, call the guy. I end up getting into solar, knocking doors, build momentum. I have no sales experience, but I start doing well. I start excelling pretty rapidly. And then I get recruited to work at Tesla. I'm starting making money at Tesla. And then I realized, like, this is not, I'm making money and I feel, quote unquote, moderately successful, but I'm not fulfilled. And so I just found myself in that year when I was like 25, 26, this is like 2015, 2016, just super unhappy and super like, dang, I tried all these different things, even making money, and I excelled. I was like the top sales rep in my county, in my area, but it just, there was no pot at the end of the rainbow, so to speak, in my mind. And I had all these dreams and ambitions, and best case scenario, like, it didn't look very good. So long story short, I'm getting to the point. Long story short, I find myself working at Tesla, and I literally can't take another day. So I get into this place where I'm really unhappy. I'm really unfulfilled. I don't know what else to do. And the only person I had was my girlfriend at the time, who I was like trying to, escalate in a serious relationship and move towards marriage. But I guess I was so stressed, and it was a negative place. And overall, just, things were not, I was in a really bad place. And so to add insult to injury, she actually broke up with me point blank, cold turkey, one day when I was at the gym. Just called me out of nowhere and ended it right then and there. And I was devastated, because here I am doing all these things, and the one anchor, the one constant that I have is now like gone and doesn't want to talk about it, doesn't whatever, and as you know, oftentimes with the male and female species, hard to get on the same page or understand one another, right?
Yeah.
And so, dude, I was down to my last, money in the bank, and I invested in a coach. Right then and there, I quit Tesla cold turkey, invested in a coach. Shout out Dave Thorpe, still coaches me today. He's one of my coaches. And we sat down and we designed a plan for my life. And, I just, part of it was faith in God. And another part of it was just a dream in the sky. And he said, Omar, if life was perfect and God had a hand in what you were doing, what would happen next? And I'll never forget, he said, if life was perfect, what would happen next?
That's such a good question.
And most people never ask the ideal. And, if you don't ask your brain a question, it'll never give you an answer. If I say, hey, Ben, or hey, Chris, what color are your socks? Whether or not you answer out loud, your brain went in there and answered the question. So he began to explain to me the power of asking empowering questions. Most people don't take conscious control of the questions. And I said, if life was perfect, I would make millions of dollars. I would inspire millions of people. And I would surround myself with the authors on my bookshelves. I would meet people like Tony Robbins. I would connect with all these amazing people, and I would have a positive impact and impact people all over the world and do meaningful work to me and contribute to others. And so now it kind of, as we look back, it's obvious that I would start a podcast and it would lead to things, and we'd give, charity events and build homes in Mexico for families and all that. But at the time, I had no clue how to do it. And so the pain of the breakup, my girlfriend at the time introduced me to Grant Cardone, Tom Bilyeu, and a lot of these guys. And so out of painful motivation, I didn't argue with her or fight with her when she broke up with me. I just kind of took the pain. But my way of getting redemption in my own mind was interviewing her heroes. So my first 12 to 18 months, I did whatever it took to interview the people that she liked, because in my subconscious, I thought that would you don't want my time? Well, I'll show you who wants my time, And it sounds crazy now, but at the time that was really the fire inside. And so I live in LA. I saw Grant Cardone was from Miami flying into LA. And so I kind of stalked his Instagram story and saw that he was going to a restaurant. So I drove to the restaurant. I pitched him when he was walking out on doing the interview. He gave it to me for some crazy reason. That interview ended up getting 200,000 or 300,000 views. And then he was like, well, hey, if you want to promote my 10X event, here's a link. I got into affiliate marketing. And then one interview led to another. And I interviewed the creator of Hot Cheetos. I DM'd Tom Bilyeu. But that's kind of how I kind of started. It was like inspiration and desperation.
Super cool.
You mentioned monetizing a following is really, really tough. That's something that stood out to me.
Right.
As I watch your videos and stuff, dude, you're an incredible interviewer. And obviously, you know how to reach people and get in the right rooms and talk to the right people. How, though, are you monetizing that? I mean, you mentioned affiliate marketing. Maybe you dive into that. I don't know. But, interviewing Patrick Bet-David or Alex Hormozi or Grant Cardone doesn't necessarily, or Tom Bilyeu, pay the rent.
Right.
How do you turn that into these views? And then how do you monetize that? Because a lot of people are scrappy, right? They're starting to do this right now. Yeah. But how did they then turn on that monetization switch? How'd you do it?
Yeah, so there's a great concept. I actually heard it from Russell, but it was expanded upon by Dr. Benjamin Hardy. And everybody who knows me knows that this is my favorite motto. It's 3 words: who, not how.
Yeah.
Who, not how. And I cannot explain to you the level of degree to which those 3 words have changed my life many times and continue to. But in short, we've monetized through, over a dozen different ways over time in different seasons. But what I started doing was kind of interesting, because from the beginning, it was weird, man. I didn't really have too many limiting beliefs because I had such a fire inside. So my first video ever, I interviewed when I first started doing interviews, my first big interview ever with Cardone. I think that was 6 months in or something like that. I literally, after I went to the restaurant and pitched Grant, and I was so nervous, and he was in the restaurant and the door would open. I'm waiting outside. I'm like, oh, I'm a stalker. What am I doing? I didn't know anything. I didn't even know if I was a good interviewer. You know what I mean? I literally just kind of sometimes I trip. I just kind of acted like an interviewer, and all these people started saying, yeah. And I was like, oh, I guess. Okay. Right. You just assume the role. I just kind of
fake it till you make it.
Yeah, by the grace of God, I just kind of willed it into existence, fake it till you make it. But it was genuine on the inside. Yeah. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was short on cash, right? Because I had quit the job at Tesla, so the money ran dry. And what I did was, they say necessity is the mother of invention. What I did was, when we did the Cardone interview, he was like, when I met him outside the restaurant, he was like, yeah, but I'm only here for another week. Could you do early next week? And I was like, yes, absolutely. And he was like, okay, can you have your team come here or whatever? And in my head, I'm like, I don't even have a team. But I was like, yes, absolutely. And all that.
I'll get a team.
Yeah, right. We'll be there.
I'll figure. I remember it was a Tuesday, and I remember I was so nervous, and they made me sign an NDA and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh my God. And this is peak Cardone. If you're not first, you're last, the 10X rule. We're talking 2017, early 2017. And so I agree to do the thing. I scramble after that to find videographers, find a production company, but I don't want to find a friend, this is Cardone. So I forget, it was maybe just under $1,000 for the first shoot. And I didn't have any money, but I told the production company, I was, yeah, absolutely. It's Cardone. By the way, is it possible to get a net 30 invoice, right? So that I have 30 days to pay it, because I didn't have any money. I'll figure it out. So they were like, yeah, absolutely. It's Cardone. We'll do that. So then I scrambled and I started calling local real estate offices and asking if they would sponsor the episode to cover the costs. And I didn't make a profit or anything. The exact invoice bill was exactly the sponsor fee, and I had the sponsor pay for that. And till this day, if you go to that Cardone interview, you'll see like a real estate company logo in the front of it. And so before I ever had an audience, I was just really resourceful at being transparent and honest. Like, hey, I'm interviewing this person, these are the costs associated, and I would get sponsors. So right away, I kind of built the muscle of monetization. And then when that video came out, fortunately, a bunch of people in the real estate space saw it and were like, dude, I love that video. Can you guys help us make videos?
That was super cool.
And I was just like, yeah, absolutely. Right. My whole life is doing aligned things, and then blessings kind of come to me in this vortex. Right. And I realized for a lot of people, that's usually what happens. It's like they tinker and try things, but then usually the market kind of asks you for what it really wants. Like you might think it's this, and then the market will pivot and tweak it for you. But bottom line is people, real estate agents and real estate brokers watch the Cardone interview and we're like, hey, can you make videos like that for our office? How much do you charge? So I would ask my video teams, how much does it cost? And they'd be like, oh, well, to do a video like that, it costs $2,500. So then I would charge them like $5,000 to the real estate person. They'd say, okay, so my video team would get $2,500. I'd make a $2,500 markup. They handle fulfillment. And so pretty soon I would sell 2 or 3 of those deals, and I was making 5, 6, 7K a month. And then I started making a little bit of AdSense, and I started making sponsors. And so it was kind of like pretty organic in the sense that demand kind of came to me. And then I sold a podcast course. And so there was evolutions of stuff, but I'm just getting really granular as to kind of how monetization opportunities came to me and how I leveraged, because I don't know anything production wise, but I just knew, hey, these people have a demand for a video. They're asking me for a quote. The production team was $2,500. I'll charge $5,000 and make the difference of the $2,500 profit just for brokering the deal. And so once I did that, it showed my mind like, oh, wow, like there's something here. And so that was the beginning for me.
Very cool. And since we're on the topic of monetization, I've got a question of curiosity, because for those, by chance, if you haven't seen, just on YouTube, Passionate Few or Omar's name, it'll all come right there. And you can see all of the amazing interviews he's had from Cardone, Tom Bilyeu, more big names to come. No spoilers, but you know, you are known for interviewing big names and creating a big social following, and not necessarily, I guess not you do it, but not known so much in the online marketing space, right? For selling things online, but you see your name pop up on all kinds of affiliate leaderboards, right? For mastermind.com, you're in the top 10. Our traffic secrets book launch for here at ClickFunnels, you were in the top 10. Explain how you've been able to bridge that gap, and you're also, you're following, but then sell to them as well.
Yeah, so it's been crazy. We generated millions of dollars, and it's funny because I always wanted to make money in certain ways, but it was like the market always created other opportunities than I wanted, which was kind of interesting. But yeah, I started. It's actually very interesting, and I'm surprised more people don't do it. But basically, what I realized is that interviews kind of work like webinars. And what I mean by that is when I started interviewing a lot of these people, I didn't do this to make money. Like when I started, a lot of people do it to build brand and all this. I did it to fulfill a life's calling. And I know that sounds really dramatic, but to me, it was like in my soul, I was always the type of person in class who would have questions that were kind of weird. So I wouldn't ask because I was nervous. As I grew up and started doing the podcast, I'm like, wow, Frank Kern is like sitting right in front of me. I can ask him whatever I want for an hour. Like, yes, like I love this. And so long story short, I start interviewing all of these, online entrepreneurs and internet marketers, also brick and mortar, like just from, different industries. And I realized they all had products they were selling and offering and webinars and, different stuff like this when this was all new to me. And so I remember the first couple of guests, it was like, that I started doing affiliate deals with was maybe like Dan Locke. I did stuff with Grant. I started doing stuff because after the Grant thing, I remember not even checking my affiliate. Like I would just put the links and not even check it. And then like 2 or 3 weeks later, I'd look and it'd be like 7K and then 15K and then like 30K. I'd be like, what? Like, how is this?
And you're not doing email blasts or anything. You're just doing this, pushing this through interviews. So how does that work?
Zero. Yeah. Very, very, very simply. Like if you look, speaking to Ben's point, we did, I forget the exact number, but I think it was like 122,000 in revenue. It was over 6 figures in revenue multiple times per interview, because in the interview, I just put a little pop-up lower third. I had my editor pop up a lower third, just saying, if you're enjoying this interview, click the link below to learn more about Dan Locke's program or whoever, Dean's program or whatever. So we would get traffic to just click. We'd put the first link. So kind of like in the same way that like a webinar works for people to learn the hero's journey and the success story, interviews is like an organic webinar, because at the end of an hour, people fall in love with you. So we'd have calls to action in the beginning, in the middle, lower third pop-ups. And then at the end, I would have a CTA. Hey guys, if you enjoyed this interview with Dean, make sure to check out him and Tony's brand new program. You can check out the link below. The cart closes soon. Don't miss out to learn how to blah, 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 right? Whatever the different program was for that particular interview. And so then every interview became a JV deal.
Right.
And I started doing dozens of them. So I started getting passive income from Dan's program, from Dean's program, the Dean and Tony thing. And so every interview just started being a revenue source. And some were lower, some were a couple hundred, some were a couple thousand. But then once you start getting hundreds of thousands of views or millions of downloads on the podcast audio, that affiliate revenue started to build up pretty quickly. So in short, it was like a kind of like interview top of funnel. And then I drove traffic to the webinar. So by the time they saw the interview and the webinar, just our conversions would go through the roof as an affiliate, And then later I got privy, and then we'd send it to our email list and massage it, through our different marketing channels. But yeah, initially it was literally just a link in the bio and a lower third that says want to learn more.
So cool.
Click here, and then I would incentivize them with different stuff. Like for KBB, I didn't know anything about marketing, and I remember I would see guys like Brian Delaney, who's a good buddy of mine. And he would go all out for affiliates and give specials and bonuses. And I'd be like, we'll give you free Apple AirPods if you buy through our link. Like I didn't know how to, sell the thing, but it would work and I learned this later is, Alex talks about this. The audience becomes the asset. Like when the audience trusts you, it becomes like your signature of approval, saying like, hey, like if you back me and like my interviews, then know that I back this guy or this gal. And so just conversions went great. And there was like a personal connection, and it's evergreen too. Interviews are evergreen. So even till today, I still generate affiliate revenue from a lot of different interviews that were shot 2-3 years ago. And when you do that dozens and dozens of times, that revenue compounds. So that's kind of how cool that part of stuff started. And then later it was sponsors, and then my own podcast course, and then I would do JVs. And so it was just a series of trying things. When you have a digital audience that comes to you, it's a very different world than paid traffic that you're chasing.
Oh, amen.
You guys know. Mm-hmm. Yeah, very different experience selling to fans versus customers or cold prospects, very different.
Good point. And, it was really, the bigger the guest, the bigger the result. It's kind of seemed like that's been a trend for you. And obviously, we've heard the story of kind of, stalking Grant Cardone, seeing what restaurant he's at, waiting out in front of it. Are there any other stories that stick out to you when you've been a little unorthodox in your approach to get on someone's radar, shipping them fun things in the mail, anything like that?
That's really interesting. I love that. I've heard of the ship things in the mail, like the foot, like I got one foot in the door, like a boot or something. I've heard that. No, most of mine have been, to be honest with you, relationships, but there's been some unorthodox ways that doors opened up. Like I interviewed John Paul DeJoria, who's the founder
guy.
Yeah, Patron Tequila, Paul Mitchell, shampoo and conditioner. Just after he sold it for like 5.1 billion to Bacardi, like literally
Holy cow.
A couple weeks later. And so I'm sitting in his office, and in my head, I'm like, what the heck am I doing in this office? Like, how am I here? Like 2 years ago, you got to understand, I'm like broke, crying on the side of the road, got broken up with, like chasing Cardone, thinking, man, what am I doing in my life? And then fast forward, and I'm sitting and and they're like happy to have me and they've seen my video. It's like, what? Who am I? You know, imposter syndrome to the max.
Mm. That means you're growing.
Yes, exactly. And so for him, it was like a lot of people ask me and assume, you know, I have this like perfect, well-connected formula, but I don't. To be honest, for him, I was working out with a trainer in the gym, my trainer, shout out Justin. And Justin we were talking in passing and he knew I was doing the podcast. And this is why I'm a big proponent about talking about your dreams, because most people have no idea how many people in their network, who, not how, right? How many people in their network can open doors if they literally just asked or just were even aware that it was on your mind. And so he was asking me, who are your dream guests? So I was rifling some off. And he goes, you know who you ought to interview is John Paul DeJoria, the billionaire guy, XY. He's the 45th wealthiest man in America. Net worth is like, I don't know what kind of like tens of billions, because he has not one, but two multi-billion-dollar companies. That's, you know, I believe they call that a unicorn, and it's a serial unicorn. And he goes, yeah, you should interview him. And I'm like, yeah, right. How am I going to interview him? And he goes, oh, my mom went to high school with his personal assistant. He was like, they're good for, I was like, really? He was like, yeah, dude, I can get that done for you. No problem.
This is like the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon. It's like somebody knows somebody who knows somebody, right?
Right. Yeah. And it was so easy. And we were in a good rapport and everything. And I was like, really? He was like, yeah, let me shoot him an email. That same like week, maybe like 2 days later, it was confirmed and locked in. Week after that interview ended up doing 500,000 views, opened up a bunch of doors and got to interview him. And, you know, since I know Noah Kagan, it's so funny. You know, Noah Kagan has blown up online. I remember several years ago, Noah calling me like at 2 a.m, randomly found my number, called me at 2 a.m. He goes, hey, this is Noah Kagan. Dude, I saw you interview John Paul DeJoria. Can you put me in touch with him? You know? So it's like, you know, it's funny because once like obviously you can leverage who, not how, but at a certain point you also can become the who. And when you give value, it opens doors later. And so there's this like chain reaction of value that you don't know from the outside looking in that ends up occurring. But there was a lot of moments like that where it was a friend of a friend. And most of my interviews have always been through getting in, right? Getting in with their right hand or their personal assistant. For me, I had tremendous success with their videographer, right? Like I would do really creative things where, for example, like when I connected with Grant, I saw his video guy, Johnny the camera guy. And so I became friends with him. So I got in with him. So anytime they're in LA, you know, he'd give me a buzz. And so when he's in LA, we ended up helping Cardone, and we were like the LA production team when his Miami team was traveling. So Grant would hire and pay our production company.
Wow.
Which I started 6 months ago and having no idea what I was doing. Right. And so it was a lot of constant imperfect action, but putting myself in situations where kind of blessings or business opportunities would come. But yeah, that was it. And then once I had those relationships, I didn't have to do anything too unorthodox. Just doors would open doors, you know? To be honest, that's kind of how it happened. It was never anything too weird or unorthodox. Cold approaches didn't work. It usually came from a gatekeeper, a videographer, or someone in their corner that put in a good word and opened doors for, you know, the now hundreds of opportunities and interviews we've done.
It's amazing. And even, I guess this isn't a question, something I wanted to point out is, you know, Outwitting the Devil, Napoleon Hill talks about men having a definite purpose, right? Knowing exactly where they want to go. And it's one of the 7 keys to not be a drifter, right? You're part of the determined, not the drifter. And if someone asked you, who is your dream guest, you knew exactly who, right? That is work that you put in behind closed doors to know exactly where you wanted to go that opened the door for, you know, John Paul DeJoria. That's an incredible interview too.
Thank you, brother. Yeah, clarity is power. One of the things I learned is like, I think, and I've done this recently, is like when you know your values, that becomes your litmus test for decision making. And this is something we hear, but honestly, I had a like an emergency coaching session last week with one of my coaches. I was in the middle of my workday, and I called one of my coaches, actually Dave, the one I was telling you guys about. And was like, hey, Dave, I know it sounds super crazy, but are you down to come to the office for like 2 hours and do a deep dive with me on a whiteboard and just reassess the whole plan for the... And so it's constant iterations of that. And I agree with you, Ben, that when you get crystal clear, it's like you see things differently, and opportunities come to you, and the fears and the anxieties and stuff are not relevant. Like, to zoom in, I'll give you two more, funny stories about unorthodox ways of how I used that fire to get interviews. The creator of Hot Cheetos. This guy was a janitor who worked at Frito-Lay and cold called the CEO of Frito-Lay to pitch him this idea for Hot Cheetos. This was, I believe, in the 80s. They just made a film on it, came out on Disney and Hulu and all this. Check this out for a story. So I saw his story on Google and I was like, dude, I would love to interview him. But how the heck? He didn't have any social, there was no connection to him. So as crazy as this sounds, I Google his name and I find his name, his wife's name, his kid's name. I see they have a nonprofit and foundation. So I do some digging online. I email, I get an email back saying, no chance, I don't do interviews. And then I saw that he was speaking at a local church. And when I say local, it was like an hour away-ish. So I drove an hour to the church where he was speaking at. And as he was getting off stage, I made sure to get there early, sat front row, super respectful. And because the story is amazing, a janitor who spent more time in incarcerated than in school, finished school at the 9th grade, and then goes on to not only, become astronomically wealthy, but negotiates a deal with Frito-Lay as a janitor because he cold called the CEO. Like, it was just a movie in my mind, which fast forward years later, it became a movie.
It is a movie, yeah.
It is a movie. Yeah. And I found out this is a crazy story. So I'll give you the full of it. I get excited sometimes, so I jump around. But I saw that he was speaking at a church. He's very about his faith. And so I went, when he got off stage, I pitched him on doing the podcast and interview. He said no. 2 or 3 weeks later, I found out he was on a church tour. So he had another church 2.5, almost 3 hours away. I drove to that. And the whole time in my head, I'm like, man, what am I doing? So I'm going to stalk people to success on my podcast. These are all these limiting beliefs, but I went anyway. And so I go to that second one and he sees me again. And he's like, man, you're persistent. And I said, yes, sir. Consider me the young man you once were when you called the CEO of Frito-Lay and he thought your hot Cheeto idea was crazy, it would mean the world to me. I'm the young version of that young man who was looking for an opportunity, and I'd love the opportunity to interview. And he was like, I appreciate that and I respect that, but unfortunately I don't do interviews. So I was respectful. I said, okay, no problem. Kill him with kindness, they say. Third speaking tour, third spot on his church tour, even further hours away.
No way.
I swear to God, I drove. You can ask him yourself. I drove. Because in my mind, first of all, you have to understand, I have nothing better to do. I'm in a situation where my job. I already interviewed the guy. I'm heartbroken. I'm looking for something to channel the pain into. And I also, my hallucination in the back of my mind is either this is a colossal, tremendous waste of time, or this will be an amazing story later. And here we are on ClickFunnels telling. So,
right.
So I go to that one. And at the end of it, I don't say anything. He comes to me and he was like, I was so humbled by this moment. He comes to me, he goes, man, you don't give up, don't you? And I said, no, sir. I'm a man with a dream, And he goes, all right. He goes, I'll do your interview. And he gets my number. And long story short, we do it. And that interview ends up getting 500,000 views. A week later, it's on Good Morning America. It gets all these different news clips. People love it. He starts getting booked for speaking events for, large sums of money. And that becomes his marketing tool. And all these inbound opportunities come to him. A scriptwriter for Fox, I believe Fox Studios produced it, gets a hold of the story. Apparently, behind the scenes, people had started singing it, whatever. And so the story catches momentum because it's the only interview with him. Fox ends up catching wind of it, writing a script based on it, and he gets a movie deal with Disney and Hulu. It's the first film in history to be dual stream premiered, directed by Eva Longoria. Ends up being a huge hit. Long story short is not only do I become tremendous friends with him, me and him, he's become like a mentor. Me and him are great friends. He'll call me to check on me, and I'll see the phone ring, and I'm like, holy cow. How the heck did that happen? anytime I see somebody eating hot Cheetos, I get a little laugh internally. I'm like, "Oh, I know that
guy.
I know that guy. Tom Bilyeu, right? I DM'd him a million times to get the podcast with him. He said no a bunch. And then finally one day was like, all right, cool. Come to my house in Beverly Hills at 4 a.m. where he filmed Impact Theory. I didn't have a videographer early on, so I posted a thing on Craigslist. I met the videographer who shot the Tom Bilyeu interview at 4 a.m, pitch black in Beverly Hills outside Tom's house. Like, dude, I won this thing. Like,
That's
like
amazing.
Any more imperfect action, but yeah, the Disney movie premiered, and then he invited me to go to South by Southwest where the film premiered and meet Eva Longoria and do all this stuff, and invited me to the premiere. And then and these people behind the scenes know that I'm the interview guy, so the positioning is awesome. But in my head, I'm like, I just caught a fluke of an angle and somehow like created leverage through it. But it was all because one day I sat down and I was like, if life was perfect, what would happen next? And
not only that vision too, Omar, but this consistent persistence, right? Of just go and like we can joke about stalking or whatever, but there's a true principle here for all entrepreneurs is knowing, like we talk Dream 100, we talk about this, like knowing who that person is and then figuring out or going where they are, getting in the right rooms, making yourself seen is massive. So kudos to you, man. Like this is an incredible story.
And thank you, man. I appreciate that. And the one thing I want to add, and sometimes I forget to mention it, so I'm glad I remember, is I genuinely did it to serve. Like genuinely, like I know that sounds contrite and like, okay, yeah, like, anyone can say that, but I always had an awareness that I never came off from an energy place of, I want you on my podcast. It was always like, even with Grant early on, it was like, hey, I know you're launching the new book and the 10X conference, would love to promote it. All right. John Paul DeJoria has a nonprofit foundation. The angling was, would love to share the message of that. And so I built that muscle long before I even knew what an affiliate thing was.
Right.
Hot Cheetos, I wanted to share his story. And truth be told, guys, the reason that I called the show The Passionate Few was because I would hear all these stories and I got sick and tired of my life not working. And as I looked around, I only saw a few people that were really happy. And I noticed the common denominator was that they were all pretty passionate about what they were doing, come hell or high water. And so it was always, not just putting myself in the right position and taking action, but always what's in it for them. So the ask never came across as, I want you on my pod. It was like, hey, I know you guys are promoting this thing, would love to help you promote. And so I aligned in their values at that particular point in time. And so it's very tricky when people say no to things that are value aligned. And I think the mistake most people make is that it comes across as me. Can you come on my podcast, on my show? Versus, hey man, love what you're doing. Would love to promote your mission to the world.
Right.
And the higher you go up the income pole or at the highest level, they all want to talk about their nonprofit. They all want to talk about their new book. They all want to talk about, their contribution at a certain level of success ends up being the dominant motive for a lot of people. Once bills are not an issue. And so if you align in that, very hard for people to say no to that. Even if you're just beginning or not good, So I found that was always probably the most contributing factor to the story. Like he was like, for example, in the instance of the creator of Hot Cheetos, the messaging was like, I would love to take your message beyond just the church. Right. And that hits different than, hey, can you come on my podcast?
Right.
So I can get a lot of views for my brand, some more of my products. Right. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so that was just a huge like mindset frame that I truthfully was in a rock bottom place. And the reason I did the show was because I was always the kid that was like, how did they do that? How I would watch interviews and I would go like, I would want to know the step by step. And to be honest, in my view and perspective, I don't think I'm a good interview. People have told me that and I'm very grateful for that. And I love that. And that was always the dream. I used to write that down in my manifestation journal. People say I'm the best interviewer ever and all this, and maybe not out of ego, but just out of my desire to be better. But truthfully, I wanted to bridge the gap for people that were in my shoes. So if you listen to a lot of my interviews, my first dozen interviews before I started making money. I was totally broke. I was totally heartbroken. I was totally lost. So my questions weren't from, particularly in that era of like other people who are successful or interviewing other people who are successful, and it's just two successful guys talk. It was like a dude with less than $1,000 in his bank balance asking a billionaire, so when you were broke, what was the first step you took? I was literally asking me, and I think that resonated with people because more people were in my situation than were in another person's situation who are actually already successful asking the questions.
Yeah, what a great point. Totally.
So absolutely. I was asking from a genuine place of like, I want to know, like, so Tom, tell me, you didn't have any experience making nutrition bars. Like, what was like the first step you guys did? Did you have any capital to get the bars? Did anybody teach you, right? And at that time, particularly, no one was asking those specific questions. They were just glossing over the details that actually made the story happen. And so it was my frustration of wanting to know the how that made me find the who's to ask that question.
Which is also going to be all the people that are listening to you are in probably more similar spot to you than that other person. You're coming off that mountain. Russell always talks about that. Like if you're up here and you're always talking about how great you are, until you come down and say it wasn't always that way. People were aligning with you right there, trying to figure out how to get to the top of the mountain too. It's a genius play, even though, you probably weren't doing it, consciously. You're just like, man, I want to know these answers, which made all your listeners even more engaged. It's fascinating.
Right. And then when I would recommend an affiliate product, or a promotion or a JV deal, it was always coming across as an equal suggesting it, not a higher up suggesting
right.
Maximize rep. You know what I mean? So it just came across genuine because truthfully it was, it was genuine. It wasn't manufactured. It wasn't. I wasn't trying to like, okay, let me remind myself to humble myself. No, I was heartbroken and broke.
Genuine.
So those questions, like even to the Grant Cardone interview, I remember, dude, this is kind of embarrassing at the time. I didn't have gas money to go to that interview. My interview, I swear to God, one of my interviews with Dan Locke, this is embarrassing. It's easy to share now, but when I did it, I'm wearing a light blue suit. On the drive there with my team, my clothes got like, we were eating something and I spilled some ketchup, or the stupidest mistake you could make on like a button-up shirt. So we went to, I think it was like Nordstrom or something like that, Macy's or something. And I bought a suit. I've never told this. I bought a suit, the whole thing, right? It's like a light blue suit, white button up, the whole thing. Did the interview with Dan Locke with my tags on. And immediately after, went to go return it, because that was my last, maybe like,
wow.
The suit was like $800 and I had like 1,000 in the bank and I like couldn't afford to like, make that the purchase for this one-time thing. So that light blue and white suit that I'm wearing in my interview, but like, that's how bad it was early on and how imperfect it was like doing it, and I remember when I went to Funnel Hacking Lab, I think it was 2016 or 17. That's where I got Dan. So I just wrote a dream list and as respectfully and elegantly as possible would approach it. And I got way more no's than yeses. You're hearing a few yeses.
Sure.
But there's a lot of stories like this that end with egg on my face of embarrassment. But your results your mistakes get buried in your results, as they say.
That's so inspirational. And even, I know you realize this, whether or not, but you do represent a dream that so many people, have. And even, I don't represent the population, but on behalf, like, thank you for, fear's a compass, right? And kind of staying true and pointing north there. It's definitely impacting more people than you could ever imagine. I will tell you that.
I appreciate that, brother. And I'm really honored. And one of the things that I try to tell people is like alignment, like when you're doing things that are aligned, even if they don't make logical sense, things will happen. Like everything in the universe is like cause and effect. And when you're doing things that are aligned, more aligned things come to you. Right. So I know I gave one example of like how I would create the content and then we'd monetize it by people coming to us. And then people would want, coaching and consulting. And then I realized, we need a platform. So then we started using ClickFunnels. And then, I had a course and I hosted it on ClickFunnels. And so it's funny that, and then I became, as you know, an affiliate for ClickFunnels. And so it was kind of very organic how a lot of that stuff started. And then even early, I was quite early to the game of making clips, right? Like short clips for social media from the interviews. And so that led to me starting my production company, right? And then I started making clips that were doing great with a company called Repurposify. Shout out repurposify.com. They're amazing with content creation. But I just started finding and plugging into, once demand came, connecting with the right people anytime I got stuck. And so it built this phenomenal momentum to create good videos. Clients would come to us. And so when you follow the dream and you're doing things that are aligned, the next step always reveals itself. And that's part of the magic, right? Like they say, you can go from LA to New York, only seeing 20 feet of headlight in front of you at a time. That is so true. Most people want to see the whole path before they take those 20 feet, but you only need to see a little bit in front of you. And when you do things that are aligned things happen to you back. And so that's the message I really want to share with people who are starting or anywhere in their journey or stuck. It's like, when in doubt, ask yourself, what are my values, right? For me, it's contribution, it's growth, it's clarity, it's simplicity, it's peace of mind, it's growth, it's teamwork, right? And so by knowing that becomes a litmus test for decisions in personal and business. And I find that, as simple as that sounds, like when you come from that place, you're never stuck. Stuck is really stuck. When people are stuck or don't know what to do, that's really a function of value, not value clarification that needs to occur. And so I don't know, I know that's kind of a long-winded thing, but I just so want to share that with people because I know what it's like to feel stuck and heartbroken and lost and broke. And who am I to interview all these big, successful people? Like, I'm a nobody from a city called Walnut, California. Like, how the heck? But one foot in front of another, if you lead with your values, amazing things can happen in your life. So.
That's the mic drop moment right there. I mean, we could talk to you forever. We're probably gonna have you back on too. Yeah. I do want to give you a chance though. If people wanted to find out more about you, where's the best place to direct them? Like, where can they go learn more and follow you?
Yeah, they can check us out on YouTube or the podcast. My name, Omar Elattar, or the Passionate Few podcast on all podcast platforms worldwide or YouTube. And then on Instagram, it's at Omar_the Rockstar. A friend made that up a long time ago, and I just never changed it. It kind of stuck. But yeah, at Omar_the Rockstar on Instagram.
Awesome, man. Appreciate having you. Great episode.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Ben.
Thanks, Omar.
Appreciate you guys.